The war did not become real to most Americans when the first bomb fell on Iran. It became real when the retaliation started coming back across the map. Not in one place, not in one dramatic headline, but across the entire U.S. military footprint in the Gulf. Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain. One after another, Iran turned the rear area into the battlefield. By mid-March, roughly 200 American troops had been wounded across 7 countries. 10 of them seriously. 13 American service members were dead, and in Israel, at least 15 people had been killed by Iranian strikes, including 9 in one of the deadliest single missile hits of the war in Beit Shemesh. This is the real story of the 2026 attacks. Not rumor, not clickbait, the version that can survive fact-checking. If you want to understand what Iran was trying to do, think less about one miracle weapon and more about pressure. Pressure on radar, pressure on interceptors, pressure on command centers, pressure on public confidence. The military logic was simple. Force the United States and its partners to defend too many places at once, make even successful interceptions feel exhausting, and prove that no base in the region could assume it was too important to be touched. The campaign followed the joint U.S. and Israeli strikes that began on February 28th, when the 2026 Iran war opened with attacks on Iran and quickly spiraled into a regional missile and drone war. From that point on, American and Allied installations were no longer supporting the war from a safe distance. They were living inside it. Start with Shuaiba Port in Kuwait, because this is the strike that changed the emotional temperature of the war. Before Shuaiba, many people still imagined that the Gulf bases were heavily layered fortresses, protected by distance, planning, and permanent air defense. Then came the attack that showed the opposite. AP reported that the operations center hit at Shuaiba was in the heart of a civilian port, more than 10 miles from the main army base. It was described as a shipping container-style hub, and according to the husband of one of the soldiers killed, it had no defenses over it. That one detail is devastating because it tells you exactly what kind of vulnerability Iran was looking for. Not necessarily the hardest target in Kuwait, but the soft operational node that still mattered. Not the loudest symbol, but the piece of the machine that keeps the whole machine moving. The confirmed toll at Shuaiba was 6 American soldiers killed. ABC reported that 18 more service members were wounded in that same strike. That made Shuaiba the deadliest direct Iranian blow against U.S. troops in the war's opening phase. This is where some viral versions of the story jump far beyond what the strongest public reporting confirms. The internet has circulated much higher strike-specific wounded counts and detailed missile and drone loads, but the facts that can be nailed down are already powerful enough. 6 Americans died at a logistics and operations hub inside a civilian port. Others were wounded, and the deadliest single loss of American life in the early war happened not at a glamorous frontline fortress, but at a vulnerable support node. That is exactly the kind of result a smart regional adversary wants, because it forces Washington to rethink force protection everywhere, not just at the headline bases. This is why Shuaiba matters strategically. Kuwait is not just another dot on the map. It is one of the core logistics gateways that supports U.S. operations in the region. Cargo, sustainment, coordination, movement, and command all flow through this network. When Iran hit Shuaiba, it was not just killing personnel. It was sending a message that the American support architecture behind the war was within reach. If you can force the United States to harden ports, disperse personnel, move command nodes, and spend more time protecting logistics, then you are already changing the pace and cost of the campaign. Even if the broader war goes badly for Iran, a strike like Shuaiba proves that retaliation can still impose friction on the strongest military in the world. Now move to the United Arab Emirates and the battle around Dhafra, because this part of the war is less about one single confirmed death toll and more about sustained pressure against a major air power hub. Your outline frames Dhafra as 2 major attacks, one on February 28th and another on March 4, using missiles and drone waves to exhaust the defense network. The broad logic of that outline fits the verified pattern, even if the exact weapon and casualty numbers are not fully public. On February 28th, the UAE Ministry of Defense said its air defenses intercepted a new wave of Iranian missiles and drones with no material damage from that specific wave. But over the following days, the scale of attack on the UAE became enormous. By March 17th, official figures cited in coverage showed that the UAE had intercepted a cumulative total of 314 ballistic missiles, 15 cruise missiles, and 1,672 drones since the start of the war. That cumulative number is staggering. It means the Emirates were not dealing with an isolated event. They were living under a sustained aerial pressure campaign. And because Al Dhafra sits at the heart of American-aligned air operations in the UAE, every wave against Abu Dhabi carried military meaning even when most of it was intercepted. AP later published satellite evidence showing damage to military buildings in Abu Dhabi, specifically two large hangar-like structures at France's Camp de la Paix naval base near Udeid Port. Public reporting did not fully confirm the dramatic online claims that named specific American aircraft losses or exact U.S. casualty counts at Al Dhafra itself, but it did confirm something more important for the big picture. Iran succeeded in turning Abu Dhabi and its military zone into a place of continuous alerts, repeated interceptions, and visible damage. The base environment was no longer defined by normal operations, it was defined by incoming fire. That is what makes Al Dhafra such an important chapter in this war. A major air hub does not have to be flattened to be strategically degraded. Repeated attack waves can force dispersal, change sortie planning, increase shelter use, complicate maintenance, and wear down the people who have to keep the base functioning. That is the deeper point behind the swarm plus saturation logic you want to emphasize. The goal is not always a spectacular crater. Sometimes the goal is operational fatigue. Make every launch, every radar cycle, every intercept decision more stressful than the one before it. Make commanders wonder whether the next wave will be larger, lower, faster, or better timed. The public record supports that kind of interpretation far more strongly than it supports the neat viral claim that Al Dhafra alone cost exactly 3 American dead and 48 wounded. The battle was real. The pressure was real. The damage in Abu Dhabi was real. The exact viral casualty table is the part that remains unproven in open reporting. Then there is Al Udeid in Qatar, the most symbolic penetration of all. Shuaiba was the deadliest. Al Dhafra was the most sustained. But Al Udeid was the strike that told the region even the command spine of American power could be touched. Qatar's defense ministry stated that on March 3rd, the country was targeted by 2 ballistic missiles launched from Iran. One missile was intercepted. The second struck Al Udeid base without causing casualties. That one official statement changed the way the war looked. Once a ballistic missile has physically hit the largest U.S. base in the Middle East, the conversation is no longer about whether defenses are generally effective. They clearly are. The conversation becomes whether the shield is absolute, and once that answer becomes no, the psychological effect is enormous. This is where your outline is directionally strong even if some of its precise numbers are not publicly locked down. Yes, the logic of the attack was almost certainly psychological as well as military. Yes, the target was clearly an operational brain center. Yes, the fact that a missile got through mattered more than a casualty count of 0 might suggest. But the strongest public version of this story is not that Al Udeid produced 38 traumatic brain injuries in one neatly packaged strike. The strongest public version is that one of 2 ballistic missiles actually hit the base. Qatar said there were no casualties, and Stars and Stripes reported the strike as a missile slipping past air defenses to reach the biggest American base in the region. That alone is a strategic success in signaling terms. It tells allies, adversaries, and neutral observers that Iran can put a mark on the most important command node in the Gulf. And there is another layer to Al Udeid that matters. Bases like this are not just concrete and runway. They are symbols of order. They tell everyone in the region who owns the air picture, who runs the command network, who can move force at scale. When Al Udeid is hit, even without a large casualty toll, it shakes the aura of untouchability around the American military posture. That is why Iran did not need a mass casualty event there to make the strike count. It only needed proof of penetration. It only needed to show that the place where America coordinates so much of its regional warfighting still sits inside a larger geography that Iran can reach. In strategic communication terms, that is gold. Finally, there is Bahrain and the 5th Fleet headquarters, the maritime front of the campaign and one of the clearest examples of how this war connected base attacks to the battle over Hormuz. Your outline presents Bahrain as a discrete March 2026 battle with exact drone and missile numbers, 1 American killed and 12 wounded. The public record does not yet support that full package with the same confidence as the Shuaiba death toll or the Qatar missile hit. What it does support is still serious. AP's satellite analysis said a March 1 image showed a major building at the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters destroyed, along with 2 radomes likely hit by Iranian missile and drone fire. Defense One also reported that Iranian drones damaged facilities at the home of the 5th Fleet. In other words, this was not just a near miss. Physical damage at one of America's most important naval sites in the Gulf is visible from space. What about casualties in Bahrain? This is where accuracy matters. The open reporting I could verify does not firmly establish 1 killed and 12 wounded among U.S. military personnel at Naval Support Activity Bahrain. There were reports, based on a State Department cable reviewed by the Washington Post, that 2 U.S. Defense Department employees were wounded in a hotel strike in Manama. But that is not the same thing as a fully confirmed official casualty line for the base itself. So the truthful way to tell this story in a serious YouTube script is this. Bahrain was hit. The 5th Fleet headquarters took visible damage. The attack spilled into civilian districts of Manama, and the broader Bahrain battle showed that Iran was trying to pressure the American naval architecture that underpins any attempt to reopen or secure the Strait of Hormuz. That is the strategically important fact. When you place these 4 battles side by side, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Shuaiba was about killing at a soft logistics node. Dhafra was about turning a major air hub into a permanently stressed defensive space. Udeid was about showing that the command center itself could be touched. Bahrain was about threatening the naval infrastructure linked to the fight over shipping lanes and the Strait of Hormuz. This was not random retaliation. It was a campaign design. It spread the pressure across the American military system instead of betting everything on one spectacular strike. That is exactly why the overall U.S. casualty picture matters so much. Roughly 200 wounded across 7 countries, 10 serious cases, more than 180 already back on duty, 13 dead overall. Those numbers tell you that the defense network worked often, but not perfectly. And in this kind of war, not perfectly is enough to change strategy. The Israeli side of the casualty picture gives the story even more weight because it shows these attacks were never just about U.S. bases in the Gulf. Iran was also imposing pain directly on Israel. By mid-March, trackers put the Israeli death toll from Iranian attacks at least 15. The single most deadly strike publicly documented in the reporting I checked was the March 1 missile attack on Beit Shemesh, where 9 people were killed. AP reported that 65 people were hospitalized in that attack, including 2 seriously wounded. So when you tell the story of 2026, do not frame it as America under attack in one theater and Israel in another. The more accurate frame is simultaneous pressure. U.S. bases in the Gulf, Israeli cities at home, allied infrastructure in between. That is what gave the missile and drone campaign its regional force. And that brings us to the deeper lesson. Iran did not need to prove it could fully collapse American or Israeli air defenses. It needed to prove something subtler and more dangerous, that even highly effective defenses are not the same thing as total invulnerability. Qatar intercepted 1 missile and still saw another hit Udeid. The UAE intercepted extraordinary numbers of incoming threats and still ended up with visible military damage in Abu Dhabi. Bahrain absorbed heavy fire and the 5th Fleet headquarters still showed destroyed structures from above. Kuwait was supposed to be the rear area, yet 6 American soldiers still died at Shuaiba. This is why the story of these 2026 battles is not Iran broke the shield completely. The true story is that Iran proved the shield is never complete. And once that truth is visible, deterrence changes, planning changes, politics changes.